All right, thanks so much. Test, I think you can hear me. Okay, awesome. So we've had great weather. We used to be expecting a hurricane, so we got to think about that. But how many people here have OT or work with OT or have it in somewhere at where you work? Okay, a pretty good many of you. Okay, hopefully this talk will resonate with you. And if you're an IT background, you can kind of hopefully get this message across to the folks that do OT at where you work or your colleagues. And that's kind of and since it's football season, right? A lot of people love football. Kind of want to tie those two subjects together. So my name is Chris Sistrunk. I'm a technical manager at Mandiant for the last almost 9 years. I'm on the ICS OT consulting team and done assessments in critical infrastructure around the world. But before that, I was a power engineer for Entergy over in Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. That's where that company's based out of. They probably sent all their linemen over here and towards Florida and the East Coast there. But I was in SCADA and substation automation. Also was the founder, and I ran B-Sides Jackson in Mississippi for about 6 years, and it's still continuing on. Unfortunately, not this year. Hopefully next year they'll start B-Sides Jackson back up. And Beer ISAC, NAPCON, Dad Jokes as a service. So, and then now, Mandiant, we're kind of becoming Google, so I'll probably get one of these hats here in the next month. So I want to start off with some wisdom. I like sharing good nuggets that kind of help tie the idea together. So Mike Tyson, anybody a fan of sports, boxing, he has a really great quote about having a plan. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And then, throw your plans out. Well, the guy that interviewed him, Mike Berardino, got his quote, and he asked him for some context around that, and his response to that was, it's how you react to that adversity that defines you, not the adversity itself. So it's something really to think about as we're doing, for those of us who are in incident response, cybersecurity, InfoSec, any of these things, even engineers, we're trying to defend what we have and make them better. And that's kind of, that adversity is what we're going to be responding to. The last quote is from my senior safety guy when I started the power company. He had a quote that he told everyone, even the linemen, safety rules are written in blood. And so think about that. Something bad happens, we've got to write that as a safety rule. So it's the same thing with cybersecurity. If you do something bad, that's going to be a check or a mitigation that we're going to implement. So response plans and playbooks aren't new, right? Sports teams have been using playbooks to win games with great success. Government entities have been using structured incident response, like FEMA started in the 1970s from wildfires, responding to that. There's a part under FEMA called NIMS, National Incident Management System. That's a little screenshot there of that. So anytime there's a disaster of any kind, now just about, the government FEMA spins up NIMS. And there's a whole bunch of different parts under NIMS now, National Incident Management System. The CDC used it in responding to COVID-19. We also have playbooks for disaster recovery. Incident response playbooks are already an invaluable tool to win, prevent or minimize an impact. But in the case of a cybersecurity incident or foe, your industrial processes like this one from BP, they had the big rig explosion in the Gulf of Mexico, I believe, was it 2012? That was the Deepwater Horizon, right? That was really something that they had to write playbooks around And that's an example from one of their incident response playbooks. And then, of course, we have the NIST standards for incident response, right? So basically, what we want to say is they're not new. How can we apply them to OT environments with cybersecurity in mind? So there's an incident. There should be a plan, right? Not just someone going, help, help. So we have these incident response plans and playbooks like NIST SPA 161 standard, right? And the CISA standards that they've been publishing around that. Vulnerability response playbooks. There's also this incident command system structure from FEMA that I talked about, which is in use right now after Hurricane Ian. And this is kind of, I want to dedicate this talk to all of the incident responders. This is a screenshot from just a few days ago in Tallahassee of just one cadre of line trucks, linemen. And think about it. I think I read on Twitter, some say there's over 30,000 line crews, incident responders going to help restore the power after the hurricane hit. But also you see all the buses there. You have logistics. You have porta potties. They're all lined up on the bottom left there. You have to feed and house all these people. You have your first responders like your medical and ambulances. You have tree trimmers. You have cable TV and internet service providers going to restore. So all of that stuff follows this incident command structure. That is really something to behold. I got to experience this when I worked at Entergy doing hurricane incident response. We had a tabletop playbook that was about this thick, 4-inch 3-ring binder that would take 200 to 300 people to practice during a whole week. We would have fake storms coming from the Weather Channel or whatever. They would email us the updates, and then we would practice it all the way down to which power lines were going out, what was our triage, how do we get the quickest power on, the fastest, and get the most people's lights back on. So I really want to dedicate this talk and this idea to what's going on now. Here's a screenshot from last night. At the beginning, Florida, when they were hit, they had over 2.5 million out. Last night they were down 1 million. They had got 1 million lights back on. But Puerto Rico, that whole island was out. They've got about half the island back on. And now we see North Carolina and South Carolina and Virginia affected as well. So this is from the website poweroutage.us. And it collects all the outage data from all the power companies, and you can actually go watch it on Twitter as well, if you keep up with Twitter. Earlier, 2 years ago, we had this talk at a cybersecurity conference called S4. It's in Miami every spring or late winter. It's in February generally. And this idea of taking this incident command system, ICS, and then applying it for incident response for control system environments, which is a great idea. And so we created this group. I don't say me. It was led by Megan Sanford. And she grabbed all of her incident command background, got all of her folks involved, got the ISA, which is International Society of Automation, involved. We got global people involved. There's over 1,000 people involved in this now. And you can actually become credentialed and be an incident commander. You can go take the trainings online and become, as part of the FEMA process, you can be credentialed in this now, which is a really great organization change. So, the idea of that was using an existing system and then adding cyber incident response to that. So back to playbook idea, right? This is some playbooks from USAfootball.com, and it talks about playbooks that if you want to have for your team, like if you're a high school coach or something like that. Basically, you have to know your role and what you are playing as a team. If you're on offense, you got to know your role and what plays that you can do to take advantage of the opponent. In defense, you have the same thing. You got to know which plays that you're going to play when you see the offense have a vulnerability, and we can take advantage of that, right? So we think about it in that way. As the sports teams do, we do that in cybersecurity incident response. So part of that, knowing your role for control systems, let's say this is the incident commander. This is from NIMS. You have your, like I said before, you have your different planning, logistics, finance. Who's going to pay for all this incident response? Who's going to pay for all these hotels? Same with OT. Who do we call and when an incident happens? Do you call Mandiant? Well, great. If you don't, that's fine. Call somebody. But you're also going to have to deal with folks, instead of just normal IT security in your SOC team there, since it's an incident perhaps involving control system and physical environments, you're going to have to call the subject matter experts that are like engineers, operators, the safety department, because if there's, like, for instance, if you had malware infecting a aluminum smelting line or aluminum pot line where they're producing ingots of molten aluminum, you have to act fast. You don't want that aluminum to freeze. Otherwise, you're going to have to throw out your entire operation. So you have to act quickly, think about safety. And also, one thing I do want to highlight here, in addition to your other things like legal, HR, PR, you also want to talk to your vendors, because a lot of times in control systems, the control system equipment is very specialized. It's not Windows, it's not Linux, it's going to be some real-time operating system that's maybe custom. And so you have to use their expertise and call them and have them help you, like from Siemens, GE, ABB, whoever it may be. Even healthcare, we can even consider healthcare kind of like related to OT in some case. So we got hospitals all around us, right? So you're going to have to call the GE folks when you have something dealing with maybe malware that's impacting these healthcare systems. So I want to review a talk that I did several years ago at DEF CON and a few other places. That talk was called "What's the Difference Between What's the Difference for OT?" And that's a dad joke. So if you like dad jokes, follow me on Twitter. So we have the 7 steps of incident response. So the first step, at least from Mandiant's point of view, is assess the situation, triage. How is this affected? It's similar to when you have an IT incident. You're going to have to do the same triage. It's going to be the same as a hurricane response. What's damaged? What's affected? What's not? Who do we have available to help us respond to that? That's going to be similar. The next define objectives is going to be what's a little bit different. We've got to return the control system or the manufacturing plant or the hospital back to normal as quickly and safely as possible. Sometimes safety is the key driver there, not confidentiality. You're going to have to get things back safe where people are okay and the equipment is okay. So just remember there may be physical processes involved. The next step is collect evidence. So you got to collect your evidence to do the proper scoping and get the indicators of compromise as you're going through that. Remember that control system devices and embedded devices have real-time operating systems and protocols that are not used in IT. So you have things like Modbus and DMP3 and other protocols, Profinet, that the IT tools that you're used to when you do incident response, those tools don't understand those protocols. And so you may have to collect these things manually unless you have one of the recent companies. There's several companies out there that do network security monitoring for ICS. So you can leverage that if you have that. Now the next step is performing analysis on that collected data and to verify anomalies or finding evil, like we say at Mandiant. And there's no ICS-specific DFIR tools out there. You're going to have to use the tools that maybe the vendor has. So when we did the incident response for the Triton malware in 2017 that targeted the safety instrumented systems that were from Schneider Electric, that's one of the vendors, we had to partner with them to use their lab and their tools and their memory analysis with their software developers and their hardware developers to understand what was going on. That was really important to have as a partner. Communicating what's happening, that constant call, that conference call every day, or the roll-ups that's going to happen every day, twice a day. It's going to be similar to where you do regular incident response. And then lastly, developing the remediation plan, when to kick the bad guys out and regain control. Remember, control system devices may have constraints like hard-coded backdoor passwords you can't change, and you can't just re-image like a PLC like you can a laptop. Lastly, the after action report is going to be the same thing. You just got to document that the same way. So this IR plan objective, there may be no right way to do it. It may be dependent upon your control system, how it's designed, how it's engineered, and the safety may be number one. The incident response plan and playbooks are going to be different probably for each type of network you have. So since we're talking about coaches and playbooks, this is a screenshot of Coach Sean Payton, who used to be the coach of the Saints, my favorite team. And you can see he's got quite a bit there on his playbook there. You can see, third and long, third and short, on offense, when to pass, when to, what the defense looks like. Each of these plays are designed for a particular part of the game and using the strengths of his players and taking advantage of the opponent's weaknesses. So that's the whole idea about having these playbooks for OT. So we break down the incident response plan into use cases or playbooks or run books, and hopefully you're all familiar with those. And now we want to do the same thing for OT. That whole step-by-step instructions that maybe the IR team's used to, but also the engineers, they may not be familiar with some of these things. So, or they may know more than the IT security folks, so they have to work together to write these playbooks down and have that custom tailored incident response playbook for what's happening. Some example use cases that I highly recommend that control systems have is these four. Commodity malware. What do you do if commodity malware is in your OT environment? Often it's just finding where it's coming from and cleaning it with some kind of malware cleaner, because a lot of times these control systems may not even have antivirus, so you're going to have to deal with that. The second one is credential compromise. What if your OT credentials are compromised, like the operator credentials? That's what happened in the first Ukraine attack in 2015. The attackers stole all their operator credentials, and you have to be able to know what to do if that happens. And sometimes you can't change the password. Sometimes there's hard-coded backdoor passwords. So you have to have other mitigations in place. Another one is if there's some kind of destructive attack, like kill disk, NotPetya, WannaCry, any type of ransomware. We've been seeing a lot more of that impacting control systems in the last several years, and so you have to have a plan to emergency segment that network or have restore from backups as a critical response. The last one is the ICS protocol attack. If someone's using ICS protocols to do bad things to your control system, what do you do in that case? So we have like Stuxnet, Drink, Destroyer 1, Triton, Destroyer 2, which was discovered this year in advance. Actually, Ukraine CERT caught Destroyer 2 before it was dropped. And then this also one from this year is In Controller that we wrote a blog post about, and I believe several others wrote blog posts about. I think Dragos called it something else. They called it Pipe Dream. There's a lot of good things that we caught. It wasn't ever found in a victims network, but it's another use case of control system protocols being used for evil. So having these remediations for each play, restoring backups, resetting passwords, sever or isolating the OT network with the emergency red button script to segment the network, utilizing critical spares, that's really important. Review the tape. So like we said, tabletops, like with the power companies, we practice that emergency plan for hurricane response every year. So you got to take those exercises and do them in your OT environments, because often they may not have one very often. It may not have an incident. They may have an honest mistake more often than a malware incident. So take those lessons learned, take the past AARs, after action reports, doing threat modeling, reviewing what real world events have been happening to drive your preparation for the next thing, right? Here's an example of a free playbook that's out there from power industry. So APPA, I'll post these slides so you can get the link later if you can't take a picture of it now. But Public Power has this really great playbook about how to do incident response for like the mom and pop electric companies that's out there that's not like part of the big one. Like here it'd be Georgia Power and others. They already have playbooks, but the smaller power companies, they don't. And so this is why they wrote this one. Good free resource. So, all right, stop. Got to collaborate with your ICS vendors like I mentioned before. They have those steps documented that you could probably use in your response playbooks. They may have it in their manuals, they may not. You may have to work on them together with your vendors. But we really highly recommend you work with your customized equipment vendors to design your response to if something bad happens. And if there's an incident, more than likely they're going to have to be involved, because your engineers and operators won't have time to learn what that system does under the hood. We don't want to overcomplicate things. I'm getting close to the end of my talk here. So more wisdom from football. The best defense against any offense is your defensive playbook. No one else's. Do what you do best. This is from JoeDanielFootball.com. It's a really great quote. Do what you do best. Have that good defensive playbook. You don't need every coverage. Every coverage has a weakness. So choose complementary coverage that takes away that weakness. So have a set of 5 playbooks that cover most of your things. I had 4 there. Listen, if you have 2 of those, that's even great. A complicated playbook won't win football games for you if the players can't execute. You should strive to keep your playbook as simple as you can. Now, run the playbook. You've got those designed for each phase. You got your player strengths and exploiting your attacker's weaknesses. Remember that what you practiced and react to that adversity. So anybody recognize these players here? There's quite a difference in size, you know, David and Goliath, right? Yeah, it's really something. Is sometimes the smaller defenders can win against what would be a scary foe, right? Knowledge and preparation are powerful. So I'm not going to read everything here, just the 3 main points. Create an OT incident response plan if you don't already. Define use cases for each of your different scenarios. Like I said, like those 4. Have commodity malware playbook for OT. What if your passwords are stolen or compromised? And destructive malware in your OT environment. Those three is really important to have one about. The ICS security protocol, ICS protocol one is a good one to have. And then practice. We want you to redefine the win. So since I'm kind of close to Atlanta, I've got a dog on the Falcons a little bit with this play here. Minimize the impact by preparing, early detection, and response. So this is a lineman from the Saints. He was able to catch that football and return it to almost a touchdown in that particular instance. And he just wipes out Matt, their quarterback, right? That was due to his preparation. Halting the attacker somewhere in the cycle stops them from achieving their objective. And transparency and information sharing within your own company will help targeted orgs and even other potential victims within your own company and with others that you are partners with. With that, do I have any questions? Oh, yes. Yeah, it's important. With hurricane response, it's regular practice in the South, right? And that's why our playbook was so thick, because we had so many injects and variables that we could throw at what we've seen. Same with incident response of any type on your cybersecurity incident response plans. It's good to have a practice across teams every year. You had a question? So the best tool is having people to even start using what you have. But if you give them a tool that has that knowledge, even Wireshark understands 30 different control system protocols. And Bro, now Zeke, has a whole bunch of different parsers for control system stuff. So even if you don't have those tools that cost a lot of money, right, and there's a lot of market competition out there, you can start somewhere with free tools. But if you do get one, they all have strengths. I would suggest that you look at the different tools and do a bake-off. And for your environment, this particular tool, like a Nozomi, Clarity, Dragos, whatever, CyberX, which is now Microsoft Defender for IoT, they all may have different strengths for what your network is like. So I would test them and hammer them. Before I answer any more questions, I'm going to do some trivia. So anybody, this is a practical IoT hacking. So can someone name one of the recent control system malwares? Indestroyer, okay. Who was that? Yeah, all right. I'll just leave this here. All right, second one. Does anybody know which protocol Indestroyer used? Or I'll say Indestroyer 2, the one that was revised this year. Does anybody know what protocol, control system protocol?
I'm just going to guess Modbus.
Modbus, no.
I'm going to guess ENP3.
No, not close. So this, I'll give you a hint. It's European standard protocols. They're not what's used in the U.S., even though Modbus is used everywhere. Any other guesses? That's the winner. All right, you get that. This little Alpha Network wireless adapter there. So, any other questions before time? Okay, one question here. Okay, so how I transitioned is Stuxnet. I was doing some cybersecurity back in 2008 because of NERC-CIP regulations. But then when the news about Stuxnet came in 2010, it was simultaneously scary and sexy at the same time. And so I was like, oh, this is terrible. Wow, this is really cool, kind of deal. And so that really sucked my brain. And then I got sucked backwards into doing some research on my own. I was on the DMP3 technical committee. One of my friends wrote a fuzzer for it, and we tested it out. And I told him immediately to take all of his fuzzer tools off of GitHub immediately, because we broke like 30 different things. And then I got an offer to come work at Mandiant. So I gave a talk back at B-Sides 2015 of how to get into ICS security. So if you're interested in how to do that, even though some of the links are probably outdated from 2015, it's still a really great talk if you want to go check that out. What was that? It's on YouTube, but it's also, my slides are on my slide share for that, yeah. Yeah, B-Sides Augusta 2015. It's on their channel. So, thank you for attending. I appreciate it. Hope you have a great lunch, right? So.